Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 47 of the ITSM crowd. My name's Claire Agutter. I'm going to be your host for today, and I'm joined by special guest Chris Pope. So the first thing I'm going to ask Chris to do is just introduce himself and tell you all a little bit about who he is and his background. So Chris, off you go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending where you are. Chris Pope, VP of Innovation at ServiceNow. Been around the technology or as a company for 6.5 years, but was a customer back in, I think it was 2008, maybe the end of 2007. So my role is very field-facing, customer-facing in terms of sort of what's going on in the industry and do lots of public speaking. As well as sort of helping with our roadmap, our strategy, where we need to go as a company in this industry. So this is my first one. Google Hangouts is new to me. So there's always room for new technology, I guess. But yeah, excited to do this with you, Claire.
Yeah, it's a very sophisticated way we have of operating here.
It works more importantly.
Press the button and join. So we're going to be talking about kind of a range of service management trends and things that are happening in the industry today, because Chris's position obviously puts him into touch with a lot of organizations, but there is also the opportunity for you to ask Chris questions. So if you've got any questions as we go, please pop them onto Twitter. If you use the hashtag ITSM crowd, we're monitoring that during the broadcast. So what we'll do is we'll pick up those questions and answer them live. And as well, at the end of the broadcast, we'll do the usual blog and put some additional details if you want to contact us after the broadcast as well. What we're going to do is talk about it's a topic area that came to me when I last spoke to Chris, and we were talking about the newest release of ServiceNow. And Chris is very much an audience focused person. So I know he specifically doesn't want to talk about product, and that there's no aim for this to be an advert for ServiceNow, but some of the things that were happening in the ServiceNow tool actually sounded really, really exciting to me and reflected a lot of the trends that I see with the companies that I'm working with as well. So one of the biggest things that we talked about was improvement, service improvement, improving how we work. And that was the first thing I wanted us to talk about, really, Chris, is just why this focus on improvement now? Why is this the hot topic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, for years we've talked about, productivity, efficiency in IT, reducing costs, and too often that's been sort of reductions in headcount. Mm-hmm. And I think we're beyond that. And I think also technology has caught up and in some senses overtaking us in terms of the amount of sort of hand cranking that it needs with, as us, we're a cloud provider, we're a cloud-based service. So a lot of the things that you would normally have done to implement, run, operate a platform like ours, you just don't need to do anymore. I mean, almost selfishly, we only give you a browser and a login, right? There's not a lot when you think about how technology goes. But I think it's that different way of being a consumer-led or customer-led organization where you can just start working on things. And now it's about, well, we've got services, we're running services, we measure the hell out of things already with metrics and dashboards and KPIs. But do we ever sort of look in the mirror and say, are we getting any better? Are the things we're doing different? Are they same? Are we almost putting lipstick on a pig? And after the honeymoon period, we actually end up with the same problem. So I think for us, the innovation aspect that I see, things enter the market almost daily, weekly now with, a shiny new something or whatever it may be. And customers, like we are with our banks, with our phones, with, any number of things, we're quite fickle. You can change fairly easily and quickly. Yeah. But now it's about, with the software as a service providers, it's not as quick, obviously. And, the other love of our lives in the SIAM space, giving us that framework to change interoperably, having a la carte menu of service providers rather than the behemoth, the fixed menu, and this is what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. I think now people are freed up from those more manual tasks, repetitive tasks, and you come up the sort of the value chain, and you can now sort of not necessarily sit back and relax, but start to look at things at a higher, more holistic level of, well, we are doing that, and does it make sense to even think about doing it? Is it something we even do anymore? Mm-hmm. And if we do, it's not necessarily just a resource problem or a technology problem. There's too many things that influence that now. So if we make our bets, where's the best place to base those bets.
Mm-hmm. So almost the kind of the software as a service option, it's kind of similar to this idea of outsourcing. So once that's gone, you can kind of focus on the things that are critical to your organization.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think, we hear this a lot from customers who say, historically, with whatever the technology is, you have an army of people that run it, operate it, dev, stage, test, QA, prod, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the research dollars, if you look at what we put into a platform, no customer would ever put that amount of money into a single solution.
Yeah.
Maybe your core banking platform or trading or, manufacturing pipeline stuff. Totally agree. But for managing the business of IT, you're never going to put hundreds of millions of dollars into something. And, and we have over 3,000 R&D guys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's for one platform. No one in the world would have that sort of thing. So, and they often come to us and say, why do we feel we're better at you than doing incident management or change management or CNDB, whatever it is? There is nothing necessarily unique or differentiating about it now. An incident's an incident. There's only so much you can do with the damn thing, right?
Yeah.
But if the things you're doing don't improve the experience of the end user or the customer, then you have to ask, why are we doing them? So a lot of what we're trying to do is be more prescriptive and more sort of good practice driven by what our customers are doing. Yes, there's methodologies. Yes, there's standards. They're all good things. But this is, 2018, and the generation that are coming in probably can't spell mainframe, let alone know what one is. Yes, it's a big black box for those that, and it does blinky lights, but and they don't fall over, more importantly. So it's a different world, and you then have to think about it differently in terms of how you operate. And therefore, you've got different thinkers now that are very applicable to certain things versus more generalist sort of people that try to do everything.
Yeah, and I think it's coming back to what you were saying about kind of cutting costs. It's interesting what you say, because we did a couple of cloud-focused episodes recently. So we had Steve Chambers from CloudSoft, I'm pretty sure, and also Mark from the Cloud Credential Council. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was he said, you know what, cloud isn't necessarily cheaper, which kind of is I think what a lot of people think. It's not cheaper, but it's better, and it scales, it scales up, it scales down, it's much more free to support the organization. And that was kind of a bit of a mindset shift for me, because it's kind of often we do think about these things, well, it's £9 a month for this or £25 a month for that. But it is about what's that allowing me to do within my own organization.
Yep. And I think you're right. And it's often, when we go into these situations, companies don't necessarily know or understand how much it costs them to run it themselves today.
Yeah.
And if it, say it costs them £15 or £5 or whatever it may be, so what? That's money they free up to actually go and focus on their core business. Yeah. I'll never forget, when I was back in the day as a customer at the New York Stock Exchange, we had the classic, we need to outsource things, and why? Well, because we're a stock exchange, we don't do IT. There's better ways, there's commoditized ways of doing that can be leveraged that allow us to free up our resources to work on what we do, which is massive volume, and you make money through trading, not by managing email or, spreadsheets or goodness knows whatever it was. And I think you're right, that then allows you to be a lot more innovative, but move faster. And if you look at, we upgrade customers twice a year based on their terms and, of the release cycle, but they would never do that themselves internally, right, on a core platform that they run technology on, if they built it themselves or was homegrown or whatever. And I think you're right, there is a cost to everything, but sometimes people don't necessarily understand what it costs them to do it today. And if you think about, there's a license cost for a piece of software, that's fine. But then what about 5 environments, 6 environments with all the storage, with all the database? When you add everything up, the number of line items is significant. And you say, well, actually, training, people, resources, that's consistent and that's expensive over time. And then you say, well, is that what we should be doing? Maybe, maybe not. And it becomes but you've got to have an open mind in that view of being the technology owner to think of it differently, rather than sort of protect it and say, no, it's my database, it's my server, you're not coming anywhere near it, And that's a different mindset that people have to have.
So does working with companies like ServiceNow, does that require your customers to have different skill sets as well? If they're moving away from the kind of the traditional technology skill sets, how do they need to change?
Yeah, so we often get asked to provide our, I guess you'd call them recruitment profiles of the types of resources we hire to manage, run, develop, and operate the platform, because it's a different sort of role definition. In many respects of what we do, you don't need a DBA, you don't need a network, you don't need a middleware, but because that's all taken away. Essentially, you have a browser that's about as advanced as you get, and even then, you don't own the browser when you think about it, right? We're on Hangouts. There's, other browsers are available. I think we have to say that officially.
This one works for now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Until tomorrow when someone else comes out with something. Yep. But I think, it's a different skill set. And I think, I always sort of link it to the whole, in a similar way to like SIAM, where you have the retained organization. That's a different skill set than the people that you had running the services initially, because they're now looking at things that they never used to get the time to, or unless there was a major initiative to transform something or, reinvent a platform or do something else. They were sort of the more moonshot type projects, whereas now they're a bit more strategic, thinking about what we can do and where we can do, because that operational level of running a service management platform, or you look at Workday, right, a HCM platform or SuccessFactors or something, that the effort, the time, the money they're putting into running those services is way beyond, as I said, what you could do as a company. And you say, well, what is it we actually use? And it's that classic, you buy a lot of technology and you end up using 30-40% of it. And you spend a lot of time customizing it. And you're like, well, are we getting the benefit versus letting somebody else do it for us?
Yeah. And I see kind of a split in the industry at the moment, because the 2018 DARA State of DevOps reports just come out. And one of the things that was really interesting for me in there was the fact that organizations who outsource functional areas perform very, very badly, or much worse than organizations that are doing things in-house. So we have this kind of DevOps approach, which is, every company is a software company. Let's try and co-locate everybody. Let's try and do everything internally. But then a lot of the larger organizations that we work with and we speak to, more and more things are getting outsourced, and it is those supplier management, the SIAM skills that are becoming more and more important. And I don't know what kind of things you see with your customers.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's really sort of more become almost a shared service, but also elevated their skill set is vendor management, or supplier management, call it whatever you want. But it's also the sort of the maturity of the procurement organization, where newer organizations, and there's still many who have never done a software as a service deal that's based on subscriptions. You can only negotiate so many things. Right? It's, when you go to the bank, you want a bank account, that's fine, but you don't get to negotiate very much, but you're quite happy using the service. And it's different now in enterprise software as a result, that, if you look at a bill of materials of what you get versus a classic sort of perpetual or on-premise infrastructure, it looks like you're being ripped off, because you don't get anywhere near what you would normally get on I think, but like you say, it could be more costly. So I think what we've seen is those guys really start to think more about less suppliers, but partnerships. And we actually see we often see it come down to, where customers will say, look, you're one of our top 5, not necessarily top 5, but 5 strategic platforms or meta platforms, whatever you want to call it, that have all the work, or they are a system of record for A, B, or C. And therefore, when we work with those sort of vendor and supplier management teams, I'm a couple of customers that I sponsor globally. I do quarterly business reviews, and it's about where are we going, what are we doing, what do we see that can help them improve, but at the same time, what they're doing, and they align their goals around some of the things that we're doing. And it's a lot more two-way. It's a lot easier conversation, but also as part of that, the journey that's planned, like our 12, 18-month customer journeys, one of the dots on there generally is the renewal or a procurement activity. And it's well known. Everyone knows about it. But all the other things we do, like the projects, the upgrades, our events like knowledge or training, they're all on the same journey roadmap. It's not just a software piece that we get a procurement once every 3 years. And then when you come to the negotiation stage, if you will, of the contract, everyone's aligned. Everyone knows what's going on. And therefore, if not necessarily I become a blocker here, but look at all these other things that this is strategically important to.
Yeah.
It's just another step on the road of the journey of working with this as a partnership.
And I think I'm kind of moving our agenda around a little bit, but this is a topic that is just fascinating to me, because I was over in Zurich recently, and it was the kind of the kickoff of a SIAM special interest group over there. And one of the big topics of conversation, so quite a lot of people from lots of different companies, and they were saying, SIAM's, it's brilliant, we're using it, we're doing our best, but how do we deal with the fact that we got really crappy contracts given to us by procurement in the first place? And this kind of links to that wider trend about IT being embedded in the business. The business processes have to change, and that's where kind of enterprise service management is coming in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, just to put the shocker out there, is blockchain is not the answer. Before,
no,
God help us. I'm yet to find a valid use case where we would play a part, right? Because the whole point is it's disintermediated. That's the whole point. So you can't have a broker that. Anyway, that's a different day. We'll do that. Maybe that blockchain crowd. There's your spin-off. No, I think it's right, because it's interesting, because the contracts are very different around the service levels you get. And like for us, an example, if you call and log an issue, you set the priority and we respond to you. Not us saying, well, actually, in our definition, it's a medium. No, it's important to you at that point in time, because every customer operates differently and uses us in many different ways. That at that point in time, to them on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock, it's important. This is Sunday afternoon to another, or September for a university, it's student onboarding, it's critical to them. So, it's a very different way of working about it. Yes, you have uptime and all those other things, and, and recovery type stuff, but that is very different then, because often what you would end up with, a big healthcare customer I worked with not long ago, they had 9,000 different SLAs they were trying to manage and monitor across all their providers. And they tried to put them all on our platform. And of course, we ran them and we measured them and we had dashboards that were all over the place. And you're like, well, actually, even if 5% of those changed, maybe on a weekly basis, the manpower required. And then you say, well, what are you actually getting by beating them over their head to have a 30-minute response time anyway? What are you going to do? What difference does it make? So I think yes, there's lots of ways to do that, but you sort of fundamentally go back to is what is the outcome you're trying to drive? And then what's the appropriate way to solve it? And I think the difference there is saying, look, the other part is there's what we often talk to, which is a fair exchange of value. In that, yes, I'm providing this service and it may be more expensive or less than what you're paying now, but the value you get from what I'm giving you is very different to what you give today. And therefore we're invested heavily to make sure the customer's successful. And you see all the go live cakes and all those other fun things that we do, right? So we don't celebrate a win when we get a PO. That's the start. When you're live in production and you're using us, that's when we start the real journey and we have the cakes and everything. So I think it's a slightly different mindset in that sense, but also I think the other side is once the procurement people do the PO and it's quarter end this week, the customers that close with us this week, their environments will be up and running, ready Monday morning. Dev, test, prod. And now it's like, well, we're paying for this, we've got the service, what are we doing? And in some cases, you find some organizers so surprised they don't have a PM assigned yet, or whatever it may be, or get all the stakeholders ready to go. So a lot of our projects, we say, right, look, if we do this Friday and, all the boxes are ticked, and again, it's automated, the salespeople put the stuff in, it gets ticked, we provision your instances, and then ready Monday morning, it actually happens in under 3 hours. Monday morning, you walk in and you go, hey, look, I can log in and I'm running. So it's a different way where you think, okay, I can put that to the side. I can now go and focus on another contract because I know they're going to take 3 months, 6 months to order hardware and all that other stuff. It's the contracts people now. It's different because, you used to be able to say maybe redline 80% of a contract and the 20% was sort of the vendor would bend over to make sure they got your business and compromise on lots of things. I think now it's the other way because the benefit you get of us being, say, I don't know what the number is, 80% standardized is scale, performance, consistency that you don't have to worry about. The 20% that's meaningful to you as a healthcare or a pharma or whatever, that's where we want to talk, because that's the real value or differentiation you have as a business.
And I'm kind of the older I get, I guess, the more and more convinced I am
More
that
mature.
simplicity, like, geez, simplicity is the key to everything. And your organisation with its 9,000 SLAs, they'll have built up over time, and everyone will be a reaction to something that went wrong. But it gets us away from simplicity. And I think, you know, having this standardised option. Yes, there may be occasionally things that you wish you could change, but it's simple. And you know, for me, it's the language as well. You know, critical success factors, key performance indicators, service level agreements, the metrics. Let's talk about outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, right? The A in SLA assumes that you've agreed it with somebody.
Yeah.
Never actually seen that happen, honestly.
No,
and they become massive
ceremony.
contract things, right?
Yeah.
And then you end up with escalate. And this is what happened in the outsourcing world, where suddenly then you spend 2 years doing this, you've 2P'd people off to other organizations or whatever, and then you have a change of leadership or whatever, and it's like, right, now we're going to insource everything. And you're like, oh, good God, you've lost all the knowledge that went out the door 2 years ago, and you're kind of, you know, start again. It's funny, you're talking about metrics and things. One of our developers that I'm doing some work with around our testing stuff at the moment, she has a quote on her email signature, and it says, not all things worth counting are countable, and not all things that count are worth even counting.
Yeah.
And I think it's an Einstein quote that it comes from. But it's like, yeah, well, you know, what does good look like, and why do you care? You know, and I often talk to customers and they say, oh, you know, the number of incidents we have per month is increasing. Okay, that's good. That means people are following the process.
Yeah.
Now, the real metric is how many of those are the same ones that happened previously and you haven't learned from them. That's more important, right? And you start to look at leading and lagging and those type of indicators. That's what really demonstrates, you know, the success. And often these outsourcing contracts say, you know, and vendor X shall improve service by, you know, Y%. What does even that mean?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to, because as soon as you ask them, they give you a change order.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay more money.
Yeah. But yeah, those kind of headline figures can be very misleading. It's like, you know, national crime statistics, they're going up. Why? You know, are more people reporting crime? Is there more crime? Have we changed what we count as a crime? Because it's really easy to go work really, really hard on the wrong things.
Yeah. I mean, it's classic, right? What's a password reset? Is it an incident?
Oh, duh.
Should we go there?
As long as it's fixed, it doesn't really matter. But so we kind of mentioned that we were going to chat about technology as well, and I think because there's so much buzzy happening in technology at the moment. You know, you've mentioned blockchain, we've got artificial intelligence, chatbots, robotic process automation. Tell me about the things that you're seeing that are actually delivering something.
Yeah, I think it's interesting is, you know, chatbots is a good one because they're not new, right? Clippy from Microsoft came out a very long time ago. You know, he was just a bit dumb, and he took a lot of hard drive space back then. So you uninstalled him and kind of got rid of him. Then we had the wizard, right? So that's not new. I think the difference is now they're resolution orientated rather than conversation orientated.
Yeah.
And they contain a lot more activities like, oh, we see this is the problem you're having. Would you like us to do this? And even like, you know, I'm a Sky customer. You know, I can use the app and say, do this, do that. And then it says, oh, well, we're going to check the box for you and we'll tell you if there's anything wrong with it. And you press a button and magically something comes up and it says, yep, this is the fault. We actually need to schedule an engineer come to your house. Historically, that would have been the other way around. The engineer would come out, tell me it was broken, wait a week for something to be ordered. All along the while, I have no service. So, you know, it's a different paradigm. And I think there's still a tremendous amount of work in, you know, back in the 90s and the early noughties, we talked a lot about, you know, automation and orchestration. It still didn't get done. You know, if you look at the number of organizations where a password reset is still a phone call or a manual process, you know, that, yeah, it's kind of shocking, but also it's massively complex as a problem to solve. Yet the Facebooks, the Googles, the whoever's of the world, they figured all that out and it's done and dusted. So it's kind of that consumer-led technology, which often almost starts like a toy when you think about it. Then it becomes more mature and more adopted. Then we find a real, at the moment, some of these still feel like technology that's looking for a problem to go and solve.
Yeah.
Whereas, and then it becomes more mainstream and figured out. then you're like, well, actually, that makes sense. Now let's go apply that to this use case. And if you look in the crypto world or whatever you want to call it, the infrastructure that runs this, I found out the other day, it uses the same amount of power per year, electricity, as the country of Chile as an entirety. Right, and you're like, hang on, where now you get on the eco and your green bandwagon, you're like, there's an ethical aspect to this as well. AI is interesting. I think just automation of work is still a manual thing. Just because you have a PDF doesn't mean it's digital. I still have to download it, print it, fill it in, scan it, and then email it back. That's not digital. Right? In any way, shape, or form. And I think there's certain industries, like you say, you mentioned contracts early, legal, buying a house and all those things. And to some extent, I have sympathy with that sort of vertical because they're driven by how they're regulated. And the rules that they have to operate under are still very, let's call them analog. And, proof of a signed, original, endorsed, document is almost word of law. That needs to change, that digitally signed and those things can be, and maybe that's the use case around blockchain and other things. I don't know. And then a lot of that can be, sort of digitalized by just filling things in online and the workflow occurring and automation occurring. And then that's the record. So I still think there's two aspects to those that operate and deliver those services. They sometimes still need the regulators to or that set the rules to modernize what they're doing, and therefore the people that operate in those boundaries can really innovate and not spend all day circumventing or figuring out how they work their way around the regulations.
Yeah, which comes back to this digital transformation is not just an IT thing. But we've got a question coming. So Martin McKenna's asking, with the rise of chatbots and virtual agents, how do we still gather the underlying knowledge we need to make sure we are actually improving service?
Yeah. So what's interesting here is, that classic, was this helpful, yes or no, that we all see at the end of a knowledge article, or when we Google something, we don't really click it or do anything with it. One of the things we've tried to do is make that more of a conversational thing, saying, congratulations, this worked great, click here, or just say yes, or whatever it is. But the key is when you get that yes or no answer, you've got to take that back into the results. And if you're not using machine learning, that's fine, but that's got to put something in a queue that says, hey, Claire, this article we recommended for, setting up your new iPhone didn't quite work. Go review it, have it reauthored, updated, and published, so that the next time someone asks, we don't give them the same bad information again. I think the difference with using it from a machine learning or AI standpoint is you can do that at much larger scale and in a much more automated way. The other thing is sensitivity and context of things, where if you said printer's not working and I said my printer is broken, the commonality in the words is printer. There's a high chance that they're going to be similar, and therefore that's what needs fixing. But at the same time, if I said network, Cisco could be an article versus it could be a healthcare provider who's the doctor that's in the network. So again, it's about context and the situation you're in. It's difficult to understand all of that, but you've got to learn from it. And that's where things like not only natural language processing, but natural language understanding, which gives you the context and the sensitivity side of it. That's where you get the win, if you will, that then says, hey, we've got these and the probability of this is about 85%. It feels better than what a single human could do or multiple humans. Let's suggest that, but you've always got the out to come away from the bot and go to a real human being.
And weirdly enough, Martin, Chris and I were just talking about you before we went on air today. So we were saying, Martin is running an amazing conference in Edinburgh in December. I think it's on the 11th. It's IT in the Park, and Chris and I will both be there as well. It's free tickets, I think. So if you check that out, if you're into your service management and you can get to Edinburgh, it's beautiful that time of year. By all means, we would love to say hello to you. I am going to have to kind of bring us to a halt there, I'm afraid, Chris. That has been brilliant.
Cascading across my face.
The 30 minutes has flown, as it always does on these, but it's been really good to kind of chat about some of the trends in the industry, and we might even get you back in future and we'll dig a bit deeper into things like Verism and the technology that you're building in to support these things. Our next episode of the ITSM Crowd is in October, and we are talking about human ops. So kind of related to the DevOps world, but it's more about how we look after our people, prevent burnout, manage stress. So I'm really excited to learn more about that. So we will see you on that one. If you've got any questions that you want to follow up with Chris on, hashtag ITSM Crowd on Twitter. And Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us.
No worries. Thanks, Claire. Pleasure as always.
See you on the next episode, everyone. Bye.
Bye.